Good morning. I'm Monie Chase, and I'm pulling together the history of Eagle Brook. And it began in 1918 when Howard Gibbs arrived in Deerfield. His wife had died, maybe from influenza. The Spanish flu pandemic had been killing people all over the country. His college friend, Frank Borden, was headmaster at the academy in Deerfield and needed Mr. Gibbs' help. Mr. Borden was converting the academy into a boarding school. After 2 years, Joe Gibbs, no one called him Howard, left Deerfield. He had helped turn Deerfield into a boarding school, and now he had dreams of starting his own school. In 1922, his friend Frank Borden sent word the Eagle Brook Lodge on Mount Pocumtuck was up for sale. He wanted to know if Joe was interested. Joe Gibbs borrowed $15,000, bought the land and the buildings, and planned to open his school, the Eagle Brook Lodge School, in September. Reality set in. He had no plans. I don't know what to do first, he told Frank. They sat down and talked about Joe's new school, not yet built, and with an unknown number of students, not yet enrolled. Joe Gibbs spent the summer of 1922 converting the lodge into a school, hiring carpenters to build a dormitory with one long hall, sleeping cubicles, no doors. Curtains would cover the entrance to the boys' rooms. He wanted the dorms finished in 2 weeks. The night before opening day, he called Frank Borden on the school telephone to tell him 15 boys are enrolled. At 9 o'clock the next morning, Mr. Borden got a message. Mr. Gibbs is unconscious. Early that day, Joe hopped into Aristides, his little Ford runabout, and headed off to pick up the first students. As he sped across the trolley track, not looking left or right, a trolley broadsided the little car. Aristides was cut into 2 pieces, and Joe lay unconscious in what had remained of the front seat. Back at Eagle Brook, the hours slipped by, and teacher's word, "No, Mr. Gibbs, the boys were about to arrive." The phone rang. "Get a bed ready. Mr. Gibbs has been injured." Mr. Borden was on his way up the hill to help greet Eagle Brook's first students. That winter, Joe invited parents to a winter carnival. We'll have snowshoe races, toboggan races, ski jumping. Boys worked for weeks, built ice chutes for the toboggan, practiced racing, 2 toboggans, one rider balanced on top of the other, hurtled down the chutes side by side. Joe built the jump himself, a 2-foot mound of snow near the bottom of the hill. He watched with pride as boys flew through the air, pleased with their jumps measuring almost 15 feet. In 1923, Mr. Gibbs had a hand in planning everything. His knack for stopping mischief before it happened was legendary. Boys told each other, "Mr. Gibbs has got an almost supernatural ability. He knows what's going on everywhere all the time." Often when they were planning mischief, they would hear his voice warning, "I wouldn't do that if I were you." He stressed good manners and educated them about the proper way to greet a guest. They practiced 2 by 2, standing tall, heads up, and squeezing hands so hard that their eyes filled up with tears. Whenever visitors came to campus, he introduced each boy by name and watched as they executed their routine. If a head dropped or a handshake lacked firmness, he touched the boy on the shoulder with the suggestion that he start his greeting one more time. Joe had no time for finances and hired an assistant to make sure bills were paid on time. One month, when his bank account was low and he delayed payment, she gathered all the unsigned checks and began to search for him. A teacher pointed to the bathroom door. "That's where he's hiding." "Mr. Gibbs, I know you're in there," her voice rang out, and not waiting for him to answer, continued, "Here it is the 8th of the month, and the faculty have not had their checks yet. She paused. "You must come out of there." He appeared, signed the checks, and to his relief, there was enough money in the bank. In 1924, Thurston, Mr. Chase's grandfather, joined the faculty. He coached football, and after practice, he and his team lent a hand in building a ski jump designed for jumps 45 feet. That winter, although not a skier, Thurston was out every afternoon cruising down the hill on a toboggan, jumping along with boys off the mounds of packed snow. He won the honor of the first to go off the ski jump. A crowd gathered to watch him and his toboggan at the top of the trestle, poised for the ride down, and he was off. Cheers followed his flight through the air, then a collective shout, "Oh no!" The toboggan plummeted straight down. Thurston lay unconscious, a few teeth broken. His distance, 48 feet, set an unbroken record. Going off that big jump was every boy's dream. They practiced on a little jump. Ski jumping develops courage of the rarest sort, Joe told the teachers. I have found if a boy lacks mental courage in his studies and develops physical courage by jumping, within 2 weeks, he will be showing mental courage in the classroom. In 1925, 2 boys got into a fight, and one who lost decided to run away. He persuaded 3 friends to join him, and they headed down the back road to the railroad station and waited for a southbound freight, climbed into a boxcar, and were on their way. As the train picked up speed and the trees were rushing by, the 3 friends, scared and thinking better of the adventure, jumped and were back at school before anyone knew they were missing. The runaway, alone in the boxcar, had nothing to do but think. By the time the train stopped in Connecticut, he wished he was back at school and sat alone on the bench outside of the station, waited for a northbound train, and sneaked aboard. It was almost 10 at night when he crept into his room undetected. That winter, knee-deep snow turned the Sunday trip to church into an adventure. No one begged for a ride when Joe put chains on the school Cadillac and said he was driving to church. Instead, boys were grabbing toboggans and picking up sleds and hurrying up the road above school. "We'll get a faster start," somebody yelled, and they were off, gliding past all the familiar landmarks, down the winding road, past the graveyard, under the railroad bridge, and into the village. Outside the church door, they arranged sleds and toboggans close to the Cadillac. And after the benediction, there was a polite scurry to leave church, then a mad dash to be first to loop a rope around the Cadillac bumper. They watched their headmaster make his way out of church, stop to talk with friends, exchange pleasantries with the minister, and stride toward the car. The engine came to life. Joe settled himself behind the wheel. The Cadillac zoomed off. Whoever was slow to leave church, whoever failed to secure his sled, whoever fell off, had a long uphill walk back to school. In 1926, 3 boys from Michigan arrived with a pack of beagles. Dogs and their trainer each afternoon went out on a rabbit hunt. Once on scent, the frantic barking across the mountain brought boys and teachers out to join the chase. Joe decided the school needed to build up stamina for beagling and football play. Each morning, a 6:40 wake-up gong sounded. 5 minutes later, the heels down bell rang and a voice called out, "Are your heels on the floor?" 15 minutes lapsed for washing and getting into knickers and shirts, and then another call, "Outside, everybody," for 5 minutes of setting up exercises before breakfast. In the summer of 1922, Joe sat at the Rock, writing a letter to students. When you return in the fall, there'll be a new field waiting for you to play on and a tennis court. And so that's the first years of Eaglebrook. That's the beginning.